Welcome to Off Hours, a conversation between John Edwards and Chris Manning.
So with everyone tucked away in their homes, you finally got your plant engine up and running again there in the studio.
Yeah, I finally had a chance to get all of the last pieces moved from my living room to the studio, so I was able to get my plant straight line engine back up and running, and so that's now here in the shop and ready for me to use.
Yeah, the last time I saw it, it was just dangling precariously. I shouldn't say the last time. The second to last time I saw it, it was dangling precariously in the air off the end of a forklift. Actually, it wasn't even a legitimate forklift. That was a skid steer with a forklift attachment on the front.
Please don't remind me of that. I still have nightmares about moving that thing around and the way that it was being put onto that truck. But anyway, it's here and it's safe. All of the truly delicate bits are things that I brought myself. Mm-hmm. They're not the light bits necessarily because that table weighs probably more than you do. Mm-hmm. Still, getting the parts here that were a little more delicate and fragile, I took care of that myself. So yeah, I was able to get that here into the studio last weekend and got it reassembled. So the next one is the Rose engine because that's still all sitting in the living room. And I think that's the last piece of equipment that's sitting in my living room. So Tamara will be happy that that's finally out of there this weekend.
The last vestige of your former life.
Yeah, that's right. So it's slowly all of the reminders that she had of having equipment and machines spread everywhere will be gone. It'll be just a memory.
I'm sure the cats will miss them.
Well, no, actually the cat sort of ignores them, so she doesn't really care about them. Although she does tend to chew on the leather cords, so when I was rebuilding it, I decided to put new leather cords on, partially because they had been disintegrating in the sunlight, but also because the cat had gone off and started chewing on them, so I didn't want a counterweight all of a sudden dropping in the middle of working and messing up a piece, so I decided to rebuild them and put new ones on there.
It looks rather handsome, all freshened up with brand new leather strapping. Mm-hmm. I was intrigued by the way you had actually affixed the weights. It almost seems impossible that it works, but when you compare it and think on it, it is actually a much better system than using, say, a leather staple. Care to explain how the weights are held on your plant engine?
Yeah, we'll put a link to an Instagram post that I put up and also to a new video, which we'll talk about in a minute. So the method for attaching this, you need a loop at the end of the cord, something that'll hook through the counterweight on one end and onto the headstock on the other end. And so this system just uses two slits that go through the cord itself, and then you're passing the cord through and basically using friction to make the cord sort of stay where it is. It's a system that I saw in a couple of photos from old engines, the way that they'd been set up. Some of the older promotional photos and everything of the plant engines, I was able to sort of get this idea from them. It's a nice idea. It works better than the metal staples I was using, and frankly, it looks a lot nicer than the metal staples as well.
Yeah, and beyond just the friction, too, you've actually got the leather sort of pinching in on itself and pinching even harder, depending on how much weight is actually pulling down on the leather.
It's almost like a sort of a Chinese finger trap type idea where it's, it uses the weight on itself to help grab itself and prevent it from sliding and slipping. One of those counterweights that's on there is probably 40 pounds, so it's the sort of thing that's got a fair bit of weight on it, and this is only a 6mm leather cord, and it's able to hold it up quite nicely. And again, the friction and weight from this is actually pretty good, and it manages to hold itself in place.
So you have plans for the first item you'll be guillocheting, straight lining? Is that a
engraving? It's engraving.
Engraving?
Yeah, engraving is what it is.
Engraving just seems like a slight.
No, it is engraving. Hand engraving is still pretty good. It's still impressive. I'm actually going to be trying my hand at that soon as well. But hand engraving is still impressive. So engraving in general, that's what it is.
All right, fair point. And maybe we'll touch on your hand engraver shortly too. But do you have thoughts or plans in mind for the first thing you'll be engraving on your straight line engine?
I've got a couple of ideas, actually. I've been inspired by a few people out there who are doing some little pieces in this pandemic that people are sort of locked at home, and sometimes they're sort of removed to their home studio, which maybe isn't as well equipped as their normal studio is. So I've seen a few people doing engraved pieces. There's actually a nice little pocket knife that Gerber makes that is designed to use the little disposable utility blades, the parallelogram utility blades that are pretty ubiquitous out there in the world. So I may take one of those and do some engine turning work on one of those. I've also actually just ordered a couple of Zippo lighters because you can order those blank without any engraving or markings on them. So I've got a couple of those coming in, and we'll do some experiments with that and just sort of see how they turn out and see what they look like. See if I can get some neat ideas going. That's nice because you can actually buy those made of sterling, and I don't have to make anything myself. I just have to actually adorn it with some engine turning. So yeah, I've got a couple of ideas for just little things to sort of get me back in the groove of engine turning because it's been a while since I've done any. And with watch dials, well, that's going to be primarily what I'm doing in the long term. I need to sort of work my skills back up to doing precision engine turning again.
So will these be items for sale then to help keep this studio afloat, or is this more just for fun and pleasure?
At first, I think it's just going to be for fun, just some sort of little things to experiment with. Maybe there'll be some random acts of art, and I send them out
acts of art.
I send them off to some people, and as little thank yous for stuff they've done for me over the years or whatever. So we'll see if people like them and there's some interest in them on Instagram. Then maybe I'll go off and do up a couple of them and throw them on my website. Certainly, they'll be good fodder for videos and showing people how engine turning actually works and how you do layout and how you actually engrave pieces. It's going to be interesting. I've been looking for little things like this to sort of play around with and engrave. So this is going to be a nice opportunity for me to actually sit down and play with some things without needing to actually make the base object first. That's been one of the things that's always annoyed me is I don't want to have to necessarily make a piece of jewelry just to be able to engine turn it. I would like to be able to just grab something and go and not have to worry about making that original object.
Well, speaking of fodder for new videos, this plant straight line engine has actually served to reignite your YouTube channel.
I've finally gotten around to recording some footage for my own channel. We've been talking about how I've been getting Rich's channel up and running and doing some recording with him and doing some editing with him. And I've finally been able to get a few videos recorded for myself. So the first one is just an intro to what I'm going to be doing with the channel. At first, it's really going to be an introduction to the machines and the engines that I have in my space, mostly because the jewelry bench and the watchmaker's bench are not set up yet. We're still working on that space, and of course, that's been put on hold a little bit with the pandemic that's going on right now. So that'll still be probably another few months before that space is done, and I can actually get back to working on those kinds of projects again. But in the meantime, I do have a number of machines and engines already set up in the studio, and I thought I would give sort of a tour of each of them individually. So the first one is on the plant straight line engine. I shot a little bit of footage of me reassembling it so that people can see what it looks like and sort of how something like that goes together. And then also a little bit of a walkthrough on what the parts of the engine look like and whatnot. I didn't show off anything about actually using it or any engraving on it yet. I'll wait until a future episode to do some work on that. And that's where some of those earlier things we were talking about, lighters and, little pocket knives and stuff like that, that'll come into handy, with those videos later on, because then I can actually show a project and say, okay, this is how I go about laying out the project, and this is how I go about figuring out what it's going to look like and, where things are going to go and whatnot. Those will come a little bit later on, but yeah, that'll be good footage for that too.
And you mentioned the hand engraver. You're going to start dabbling in a bit of engraving work, and those air-powered engravers are a huge help in doing any sort of engraving in metal. What sort of research or thought did you put into the one that you ultimately decided on investing in?
The hand engraving is really, really challenging, and I have to say I have a huge amount of respect for anybody that still uses a manual push graver. Though they are not easy to use, and you really have to know what you're doing, and they require a fair bit of force to use as well. And I've always had a difficult time trying to do anything with a manual push graver. I've been looking around for quite a while for an air-powered engraver, and when I was at Workbench Con a couple months ago with Rich down in Atlanta, I happened to meet up with Caleb Kraft, and he's been teaching himself hand engraving over the last year. And he actually pointed me towards a gentleman in Vietnam who is making his own air gravers. And so I contacted him and got an air graver from him. We'll see where I go with it. I suspect I'll probably end up getting into a nicer air graver at some point. This one's not too bad, but it's it's a little bit sloppy. The tolerances aren't quite as nice as they are on some of the higher end ones, but The higher end ones are also 3 or 4 times the price. As a way of getting into it and sort of getting started to see whether or not this is something I'm going to do a lot of, then this is sort of a good way to get going.
How does it compare to something like a GRS graver, or have you had hands-on time with one?
I have had hands-on time with the GRS gravers. One of the things I like about this is that it's palm controlled, so when you put pressure on the back of it with your palm, it changes the intensity of the stroke. And I like that a little bit more than the foot-powered ones, or the pedal ones that are out there, where you can adjust the sort of the intensity of it using a foot pedal, sort of like what you can do with a sewing machine. That one I've never been quite as happy with as I am with these little palm-powered ones. So it's not bad. It certainly does the job, and so far I'm reasonably pleased with it. Just the little bit of playing around with it that I did. I just ordered a engraver's ball for making it a bit easier to engrave in. So that arrived yesterday, but I haven't really had a chance to play around with it much. Again, part of the problem with the space right now is that we just don't have all of our workspaces set up just yet. So having a permanent place for something like that to get working isn't available yet. So I've just been sort of grabbing some space on workbenches in the shop space and sort of playing around with it in between other jobs.
I know quite a few people who do hand engraving in metal, and all of them use these powered engravers to give them a hand, so to speak. The most public of these would be Grant Chambers, who's well known on Instagram for his knives, and he actually just wrapped up quite a phenomenal piece, and it was very intensive in terms of the engraving, and he actually made the entire sheath of this knife out of 2 sheets of steel that he then laser welded together. It was quite an accomplishment, and actually really neat the tonality of the sheath if you were to, say, flick it with your finger. But he's a big fan of using an air graver as well. But the reason that he came to mind just now is you're talking about these engravers balls or engravers blocks. Then he actually made his own out of a bowling ball, and which he cleaved the top off of. Right. And then he had a machine shop do a dual threaded rod for him, so it has inverse threads on the 2 sides, so you can open the block up that you'll actually be setting the piece in that you're going to be engraving. It's quite impressive to see this engraver's ball that he's built, and he's certainly done some phenomenal work with it since the time that he first made it.
Yeah, I certainly know a few people who've built that sort of thing, and I mean, I have the machines to be able to do it. Like, I've got a big enough lathe that could easily do that sort of work and turn a large enough ball to do it. So who knows, maybe down the road I'll build my own engraver's block. But yeah, for now I just bought a GRS one just because they were, they're available and they're not horribly expensive, so I was able to get one of those. Yeah, if you're looking to see somebody who does some truly impressive work, Joanne Ryle, she's got a brilliant Instagram account. She shows off the stuff that she's doing. Actually, she's the one that I got the inspiration from for some of these little pieces that I want to play with engine turning. She's been doing some hand engraving on those. And the stuff that she does some watches as well. She does a lot of Rolexes where she does complete engraving, bracelet, case, everything. And some of the pieces that she's done over the years are just absolutely phenomenal. So I'll put a link to her stuff in the show note. But yeah, she does some amazing work on everything that she does. She's just a brilliant engraver.
Making the engraver's block yourself is right up there in the similar category of not wanting to make absolutely everything that you're going to be engraving. And it's like prioritizing the things you actually want to be working on versus the things you could be working on.
Yeah, although having said that, I know a lot of engravers end up engraving their engraver's block and decorating them themselves. So there's a lot of that happens with these engravers block for sure.
Procrast working.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're bored. You need to do something. You want to practice. What's right in front of you? There's a big piece of steel in front of you. The first couple of videos from my Inside the Studio channel should be up on my channel probably before this actually goes live. You can go out and check them out. I don't know how regularly they're going to be published. It really depends a lot on how much I can get in there and actually record stuff. And as I was finding out yesterday, trying to record into my camera and with it facing the direction I wanted to, I have the big glass window right in front of me, and even with the frosted window, I could barely see anything. It was so bright yesterday that I couldn't actually see into the camera without squinting. So we'll see how often I'm able to sort of record stuff. The next one I think I'm going to do is on my Cromwell lathe. And a lot of people have seen lathes. A lot of people have used them. A lot of people probably even have them in their shops. But the Cromwell's a bit of a unique machine, and so I'm going to give a little bit of a tour of that and show off some of what that does.
You got the new iPad en route. Has it arrived yet?
Yeah, it's really terrifying how fast that thing is. I haven't bought a new iPad Pro in a bunch of years. I was due for a new one, so I decided to buy the newest one, and I have to say it is unbelievable how fast that thing is. And I've actually been using it quite a bit lately for drawing as well. The new pencil's really nice. It's an improvement over the first generation one, so I've been pretty happy with that, and been doing a lot of sketching on that and a lot of layout work on that. So that's been good to sort of play with. What I'd really love to get a couple of the pro apps out there that I use on my MacBook onto the iPad. Things like Logic, things like Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve. It'd be great to be able to get that stuff on there because, frankly, those iPads are so fast now, especially the graphics cards that are in them. If people would start writing apps, high-end pro apps for those things, they can certainly take the workload that they'd be put under.
And you've got mouse support now too, which makes it more pro capable.
Yeah, I haven't actually played with any of the mouse support. I've got a couple of Bluetooth mice and trackpads out there, so I should probably try plugging one in and see how it works. But I haven't had a chance to really play around with that yet.
And no one's really had a chance to play around with their new keyboard for it either, as it's not really shipping yet, and their stores are all closed for the time being.
Yeah, I don't even know if they'd be in their stores right now. I don't think they plan on shipping those until May sometime, so I think we're probably 2 months away from actually seeing those out in the world. I do like to have a keyboard available for my iPad. I do use it quite a bit for writing long-form stuff if I'm traveling or whatever. Sometimes it's nice to just have the iPad with me instead of needing to lug around a multi-pound laptop as well. So I do like having that iPad with a keyboard. And I've used the Bridge keyboards over the last couple of years, and they're okay. They're pretty reasonable. But this new one from Apple looks really intriguing, and not just the fact that it has the trackpad built into it. I honestly don't know how much I'm going to use a trackpad in iOS. It's not really something I've been, clambering for. I know a lot of people have been, but I'm not really the trackpad train yet on iOS.
Yet.
Well, I have to try it, and obviously, I have to try it with the new support as well, because the little bit that I did play around with it once, it was pretty limited. But frankly, the pencil is far more interesting to me than the trackpad or mouse would ever be. But the sort of mechanics and the ergonomics of this new keyboard look particularly interesting. So I am very intrigued by it, and I'm looking forward to trying it out.
Mm-hmm. And I do hope more and more of the pro apps do come on board, and I imagine more and more will begin to start following suit now that you've got things like the mouse support and the performance that these things are cranking out too. I just hope that I am more impressed by these other pro apps than I have been by Photoshop for the iPad, because I had high hopes, but I was disappointed and let down once again.
I think people need to realize that the Adobe of today is not the Adobe of yesterday. I think that Adobe really has peaked and is not. They're sort of coasting on a lot of what they did over the years. I haven't used an Adobe app on any device in years. I don't find Photoshop particularly necessary when you've got things like Affinity Photo or Pixelmator Pro, that kind of thing out there. Illustrator, which I used to use quite a bit, now I've replaced that with Affinity Designer, and I actually prefer it. I think it's a much better app, fraction of the price. So a lot of that stuff I haven't found particularly useful over the last couple of years. And then in the video editing world, a lot of people are jumping ship off of Premiere Pro because it is an absolute train wreck. It is not stable, and the performance of it is miserable. They've done very little to take advantage of a lot of the modern GPU technology that's going on, particularly the external GPUs. So, it's gotten to a point where professionals are looking at it and going, why am I using software that's slowing me down, software that might blow up on me on a regular basis, and then paying Adobe a ridiculous subscription fee every single month for the pleasure of actually using their software. Something like DaVinci Resolve you can download for free. If you want the studio version of it, it's a one-time $400 fee, and you get upgrades for life. Affinity Designer, I think, is $40 or $50. There are a lot of professional apps out there that are not Adobe, and they work better. They understand the paradigm better for something like iOS, and they're a lot nicer to use. So if you've been thinking about sketching on the iPad, Something like Affinity Designer on the iPad is great if you want vector-based stuff. Procreate is what I use if I'm just looking for sketching something raster-based. And again, the two of them combined are just so powerful. And every single engraver that I see these days, when they're doing the layouts and stuff, they go off and they take a photo of the object, throw it into Procreate, do some sketching on there, bring the sketch that they've done in Procreate into Affinity, and then actually do the final layout in a vector-based, design in Affinity. And then they can scale it, they can print it, they can do whatever they want with it after that, and it's and tweak every line exactly like they want it. And it's an incredibly powerful workflow, and you don't need a desktop or a laptop to do it. You can do it all on your iPad, which is great.
It's just the direct manipulation makes such a huge difference there too, particularly for someone like an engraver who's used to having that hands-on sensation and interaction with the medium that they're working with.
Yeah, it's funny. We went around the tattoo convention that was here in town last year, and we had some friends that were presenting pieces there. And you walk around that convention hall, and there are hundreds and hundreds of tattoo artists, and every single one of them has an iPad with a pencil.
Yeah, not surprising at all.
Not a single person has a dead tree sketchbook and in pencil anymore. They're all using iPads, and it's not really surprising. Same thing in the engraving world. You look at all these engravers, and except for some of the really old school guys, everybody now has an iPad, and they're all doing stuff on there. And then one of the other fun things is that things like Procreate and Affinity have built-in recording options in them so that you can actually record what it is that you're doing and then be able to publish the video of what you've just done. Same thing with iOS. It has built-in video screen recording now. So yeah, you can go off and you can actually record what it is that you were doing and show people the process of designing it. And you don't have to worry about setting up a camera or having a camera and getting the lighting right on your page or anything like that. You just go at it on your iPad and you're good to go.
And actually, I believe with Procreate, it's on by default. It's essentially just crawling your undo stack and just traversing it all the way back up.
Yeah, which is kind of fun. I'm horribly impressed with the new iPad, and it's unbelievable how good it is. I know some people were complaining a little bit because the CPU didn't really get bumped up very much from the last generation, but honestly, it is so fast, and it gets to a point where like the phone is already faster than at least in single core processing, it's already faster than every other computer they make. And the iPad is pretty close to being faster than every other computer they make. It's, how much faster do you want it to be than everything else, and how much faster does it need to be?
Mm-hmm. And one of the nice things too about it not being a very big leap or stretch from the previous model is you can tell that a lot of the stuff that has been released just now was in the works when they released the last iPad Pro, because you can use the same brand new case with it. It's got the exact same pencil. It's already good to go with a mouse as well, because that's a software update. So I was just really impressed and heartened to see that the previous generation of the iPad Pro can be used with this brand new keyboard case, which I actually didn't believe the photos of when I first saw it. I thought it was one of those
an April Fool's joke or something,
or like some fantasy render by someone. But no, it's the real deal. So it's impressive, and I look forward to getting some hands-on time with that once it actually is available for sale.
And I would say that if you have one of the previous generation iPad Pros, I wouldn't bother upgrading to this one unless you desperately need the LiDAR that's on the back of it or something. But if you're a developer that's playing around with AR-based stuff and you want the LiDAR sensor that's on the back, then go for it. But otherwise, for most people, they're not going to notice enough of a difference. But if you're like me and you were a couple generations back, this is definitely a nice iPad to jump up to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and AR developers is sort of the key there, because poking around in the documentation, we as developers can't actually access the LiDAR directly. It's something you get access to indirectly via ARKit. So you just get all the niceties that LiDAR opens up for you in terms of the precision of how the iPad is seeing the world. You're able to leverage that within your AR apps.
Yeah, it is impressive. I played around briefly with the Measure app, which I think right now is probably about the only thing that you can actually use that's taking advantage of the LiDAR. And it is impressive just how accurate it is and how fast it is. It knows the world around you very, very quickly. I think they were saying that the LiDAR is good up to 5 meters. So, anything within 5 meters of you, it knows exactly where it is and exactly how far away it is. And then with the 2 cameras on the back as well, it can use the combination of the 2 image sensors to be able to pick stuff up and figure out where things are. So yeah, I'll be curious to see what people do with it. I think this is still sort of foundational technology, and we're still sort of waiting for the killer device that's really taking advantage of a lot of the AR stuff. But I think this is one of the foundation pieces that's necessary to help develop those apps that we're eventually going to have on, whatever Apple Monocle or whatever it is that we end up with a couple of years from now. And Tim, if you're listening, I do want a monocle.
I'll settle for a loop.
That would be good too. Well, if it's a good monocle, you can convert it into a loop.
Well, Focals have been teasing a new set of AR type glasses. I tried their previous generation. We actually spoke about that on a previous episode, and I was mainly disappointed that they didn't have any sort of platform in place to actually develop upon, and it's just basically what's in the box, and that's it. And the fact they were a little too big for my own face personally. But what they're teasing about the new ones looks promising, and the only unanswered question still to be answered is whether they will have any sort of platform in place. And I really hope they do, because I would be very intrigued by that and would certainly be willing to give them a go. But who knows? Apple could have a set of monocles, glasses, what have you, out just about any day now.
Yeah, I think that Focals, I don't know how well they're going to do. I think they're
waiting to be bought.
I think that they're trying to dangle themselves out there as an acquisition target. I don't know that it's ever going to be a real platform, just because it doesn't integrate heavily enough into either Android or iOS. So I think until they get bought by somebody who can integrate deeper into those infrastructures, I don't think they're ever going to do particularly well. We were looking a little bit at some of the VR headsets that are out there, like the new Oculus ones, the Oculus Quest, I guess, and that's a standalone device. But even then, it's pretty limited what you can do with it. Even as a developer, it's pretty limited what you can do with that. But that's still only VR. That's not AR, so it's not integrating with the rest of the world around you. So it's pretty limited.
So we'd be building a padded room somewhere in the new studio for VR.
Not for me. My eyes are just a little bit wonky, and I can't actually use VR stuff at all without getting incredibly sick. I won't be doing anything VR-wise. But AR is appealing to me. It's my left eye that's a problem, and I don't have to worry about it focusing on something that's that close, because it just doesn't want to focus that closely on something. So if it's further away, if I can have something as a heads-up display or whatever on my right eye and be able to see through the glasses to the rest of the world just like normal, that'd be great.
So the Focals were made for you then. They only project to the right eye.
No. And actually, what would be really great is to have a pair of sunglasses or something that I could use on a motorcycle. That'd be really nice. Being able to have a heads-up display, have turn-by-turn directions and stuff like that. That would be a great addition to riding for sure.
There are motorcycle helmets out there with heads-up displays.
And
not quite what you envisioned.
Again, the problem with them is that they've got really limited integration with the reviews that I've seen of them have not been particularly appealing. So, we'll see. It's coming down the road. It's just a question of who brings it out and when.
So do you have a motorcycle sitting somewhere that I am unaware of?
No, but I suspect I'm going to be buying one at some point. I know it's been a couple of years since I last had a motorcycle, and I've been itching to get one. So we'll see. Maybe not this year. I know Tamara's been itching to get a bike as well, so we'll see what happens. But by this time next year, there's a very good chance that I'll be riding again. So, yes. Assuming the weather's nice enough. But
today's a perfect day for a ride.
It is a perfect day, and assuming that we're allowed going outside again in a year.
You think this will last that long?
Yeah, I think that we're going to be in lockdown for another couple months. We'll see.
Yeah, I imagine so. New York just outpaced China, so
yeah, it's terrifying that a city of 12 million people has been able to outpace a country of 1.6 billion. It's pretty terrifying.
It's unreal, and to think it's happened in such a short span as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty crazy just how quickly this has hit the world. But I think we'll be in lockdown for another couple of months for sure, and then we'll see how things happen, and then of course there's always the potential for it to sort of rear its ugly head again if we come out of this too soon. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, in some ways, it's been good for you with the new studio, and then in other ways, it's been not so great with contractors not wanting to come by to do work or being essentially barred from coming by to do any sort of work.
Yeah, it's it's a little bit frustrating that things aren't moving as fast as we want them. Although Reg, who's been coming and helping out, he's coming from Montreal, and the Quebec government is talking about locking down the border between Ontario and Quebec. So even if he was here, he might have a difficult time getting home again or being allowed back over here. So even if he was here, he'd probably be heading home pretty quickly anyways. So, it's been frustrating, but at the same time, I'm also very fortunate because I have my little bubble here quote, little bubble.
Big quotation mark.
Yes, there aren't large enough air quotes in the world to surround that, but
I envy your bubble.
And the big thing is that my bubble happens to include a whole lot of fun toys. So I can complain that my studio space isn't finished yet, but at the end of the day, I have a shop full of machines and I have basically infinite amount of time and an infinite number of projects that I can work on. So yeah, I'm quite fortunate in that sense that I can do that. And that's why, I'm recording here today, which is why you can hear some traffic in the background. We haven't got the podcast studio quite finished yet. So unfortunately, you have to put up with a little bit of road noise.
I was sincerely surprised by the looks of the this studio. That's Rich's touch there, isn't it?
Oh yes, that's the problem with having a mad genius as a partner, right? Is that you end up with crazy things. We're not going to post any photos of it just yet because I want to wait until it's actually done before we post photos online. But yes, it's a bit odd. I said I want a square box in a corner that has soundproofing in it, and that's not what I got. So anyways, I'm looking forward to having that up and running, and then the two of us can actually record in person, which will be nice, and be able to record together. So
you sure you're ready for that?
What's the line from The Watchmen? You think that I'm locked in here with you, but what you don't realize is that you're locked in here with me.
The only question was which of us is voicing that.
Oh, that's me.
The only strong nudge I would have for you and Rich in this is to strongly consider you putting an evolution door on that room. If there's no room I have seen more deserving of the evolution door.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening who's not familiar with this door, I can't really call it a hingeless door, but it is not hinged in the traditional sense. It's very origami in the way that it opens and closes. And it actually doesn't take a whole lot of effort to do it, but this space is just calling for an evolution door.
Well, I think that the door that we're going to be putting on there is probably going to live there just because from a practical point of view, it's nice to have because we can put sound panels on the back of it. It's just a traditional, steel case hung door. We can put a sound panel on the back of it and help deaden some of the sound, but maybe on the outside of it, we'll put one of these doors on there and do that. Yeah, we'll see.
Door on door, screen door for your podcast studio.
That's right. There's still some crazy things happening there, so it'll be a bit before we get that done.
You got a lot of crazy and exciting and lovely things going around the studio there.
Yeah.
I'm sure Rich must be itching to get back in there and start working alongside you too.
Yeah, he's been kept away. He's isolating himself at home. Unfortunately, he's been kept away for a little while with all this isolation business, but hopefully it'll relax a little bit so that he can actually come in and work a little bit as well. And frankly, having 8,300 square feet, if the two of us can't keep at least 2 meters apart in 8,300 square feet, I'm not sure how we could do it. We've got more than enough space to be able to stay away from each other.
You could both walk around in giant bubbles. I mean, you might not be able to use the tools, but
yeah, that might be problematic.
So you mentioned Caleb Kraft earlier, who you met at Workbench Con, and something I was completely oblivious to, and I'm kind of ashamed of the fact that I was oblivious to this, but Meg Magazine has returned. They have risen from the ashes, and they're publishing again. And it turns out that Caleb is actually playing quite a big part in this.
Yeah, Caleb is editing Make Magazine these days. So they've actually come back, and I'm not sure exactly what all the details are of that, but they've come back out into the world, and they're publishing quarterly now. And they do have some great information out there. Of course, just like before, I don't think the standards have changed in terms of what they're putting out there and what they're publishing, but they've certainly got some good stuff. I think you found a couple of good articles that they had published on masks and whatnot, which relate to our pandemic topic. That's sort of been an ongoing theme.
It's been really heartening to see the way that the maker community has risen up to the challenge presented by COVID-19 and just the dearth of medical supplies that are available to healthcare workers at the moment. So Make actually has a number of articles dealing with or directed squarely at COVID-19. So it's great to see the coverage that they've been having and also the coverage that's been going on in a number of places and just the makers all around the world rising up to make things like face shields and masks and ventilators even. It's been really, really heartening to see.
Yeah, there's been a few interesting projects to get medical equipment out there, even if it's just for your own personal protection. That's nice. That frees up some of the more serious medical equipment for people who actually need it, people who are working in hospitals and whatnot. I follow the F1 racing series, and a number of the F1 teams have actually put together a project to use some of their engineering and manufacturing skills to be able to build ventilators, because there are teams that are designed from the ground up to be able to engineer and build parts in a couple of days. They'll go to a race on a Sunday and have problems with a car, and they've got another race the next weekend. So between Sunday afternoon and Thursday afternoon, they have designed, prototyped, manufactured, and sent off new parts for cars, sort of in 3 or 4 days, which is pretty impressive. So they're putting some of that engineering skill and some of that manufacturing skill to building ventilators, which is nice to see as well.
Just truly mind-boggling to imagine the rapidity with which they're able to achieve some of the things that they do in the F1 level. Which sort of reminds me, we were talking a little while back about high-speed toolpaths, which is something we'll have to dive into in a future show. Yeah, there's only so far that you can push the physics of a machine, and for them to be able to crank things out like that is truly remarkable.
There's a good video I think Red Bull Racing put out a couple of years ago. I'll see if I can find it. They were following the design and manufacturing of a part to a car, and it happened to be a simple bolt that was being sent to the car. And when you look at the design, the manufacturing, the quality control, the traceability of that part going to the car and actually, where it was and things like that, it was pretty impressive. And it just sort of gives you an idea of what those teams are actually able to do when they put their minds to it. I'll see if I can find a link to that for the show notes, because it's a really good video. But it's nice to see them sort of putting that talent to work, because right now, obviously, nobody's doing anything. Everybody's shut down, and nobody's going to F1 races, obviously, and they're not hosting them. So we need to put some of that talent to some use.
And if any of you, dear listeners, are working on any projects that are COVID-19 related or are participating in any of these communities, please do reach out, let us know. We'd love to shine some light on that for you. And if you are not wearing a mask out in public, I would encourage you to do so. And if you don't happen to have access to a mask, I would recommend checking out a very simple to make mask. It's been prototyped now in version 2.2 by Lauren Brichter, who's actually a programmer by trade. But I'm impressed with what he's been able to crank out there, and messed around with making a couple of these, and they are very simple to make. And a child could do it with some supervision on the sewing machine. But my wife has managed to teach her 3-year-old how to use the sewing machine. So if she can do it, you can do it. I'll be sure to link to that in the show notes for you as well, so you can stay safe and keep well.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see more people wearing masks out into the world, so that I don't get quite as many weird looks as I have been as I've been going out with my mask.
And if you're looking for something to keep yourself entertained while staying self-isolated, we've mentioned Gary Hustowit's work here on the show before, and he's actually been making his documentaries free for viewing, sort of 1 week at a time. If you're into design at all, I would highly recommend checking out those documentaries. And you can find a new one each week posted up at ouprettythings.com.
Thanks for listening to Off Hours. You can find detailed show notes at offhours.show. If you'd like to keep up to date with the show, follow us on Twitter @offhours. John can be found on Twitter @UnderTheLoop, and Chris can be found on Twitter and Instagram @silver_hand.